Good afternoon. This is I think, one of the few talk that we are going to do in English. I'm quite excited about our guests and also, yes, about this moderation in English, which is really, a new thing for me. We are here because we worked a lot the past 4 years in Manifattura Tabacchi, and Many Possible Cities is one of the, let's say, product and the results of the work we're doing here. Manifattura Tabacchi is a regeneration process, and we took care of the temporary activation. So there was a time from the first day of the acquisition of the area that will last until this November, where Manifattura Tabacchi was in this waiting time. And this waiting time was an opportunity to open Manifattura to people and to make things happen. Many Possible City was the chance for us to not only open this place and this space, but also to reflect on the challenges that our cities are living today. During these 4 years, we had the chance of inviting people from all over the world, and this talk, I think, is kind of one of the best chance we have to speak with people that are doing amazing things in their cities, and this first talk, How to Reboot a City, is something really important for us because it brings together 3 fantastic human beings that are really passionate about what they're doing, and from 3 different really important perspectives. From one side, we have the grassroots, bottom-up processes based on passion and vision, and how a grassroots community can really change and reshape a city. On the other side, and this is Leo Valls, which came from Bordeaux. A big applause for Leo. I needed it more than you, but yeah. Then we have Mauricio from New York, and so this is the second step. So public-private organization that through its work and this amazing space, which is the I-Line, is transforming and bringing value to not only to the city but also to the community, trying to engage also. I mean, not only the mass tourism and the people around the neighborhood, but also the one that has been left off this space. An applause for Maurice as well. And then the third layer is about from the perspective of a city, the perspective of the municipality of Barcelona, and how looking at the city, we need to re-engage the communities and build this consensus that is needed in order for a city actually, or for a part of the city to really work and to mean something, not only for the people that are living there, but also for the ones that are working there and for the municipality as well. A big applause for David. So, I mean, within all those regeneration process, we are looking at the idea of placemaking and really how to inspire and engage people collectively to reimagine the public space. We are going now to left the stage to Leo, Mauricio, and David within this journey from the grassroots bottom-up to the municipality level, and then we're going to have a little exchange on the challenges and the inspiration that we have heard. So I left the stage to Leo, and thank you very much, everyone.
Hello. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you very much for having me. Hello, everybody. So my name is Leo. I am from Bordeaux, France. and very happy to be here tonight to talk about my story and the work that we have been developing in my hometown as a community. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about skateboarding, my passion for skateboarding, and more specifically the relationship between skateboarding and the city. So I set up a little presentation with some images. So how did I fall in love with skateboarding? Basically, like a lot of kids, I was 11, 12 years old, and I was playing soccer, and it felt very competitive, and I just wanted to feel free doing a physical activity, and I picked up a ply of wood with wheels, and I felt like the possibilities were endless. And relatively soon after, I realized that skateboarding was a very social activity that would allow me to make friends, but also to learn from spending a lot of time in the streets, and eventually to travel the world and meet more people. And most importantly, just spending time outside in the streets, exploring cities. So that's what I really loved from skateboarding. So yes, I've been a professional skateboarder for more than 10 years. I guess that's all you call it. It feels still strange to this day to call my name, to call myself as a professional skateboarder. I've never done a competition in my life, just so you know. So I'm really not into the stunt aspect of skateboarding, but more about the cultural, social, artistic, and urban aspects of skateboarding. How do you become a pro skater when you don't do competitions? You produce photos and videos in the streets. It means traveling a lot, connecting with different communities, and producing content. And yeah, I got the chance to live in America for a few years, live in Japan, travel from Italy to Australia to many places around the world where I met like-minded people that always welcomed me with open arms and big hearts. And I feel very fortunate to be part of this community today. So yeah, I just want to say I think skateboarding is a beautiful thing, and yeah. So yeah, again, producing content. So it's a lot about having an eye for spots or for places that are not really made for skateboarding, but how you're gonna, find something unusual and make it fun or make it playable, I guess. And it has a lot to do with the relationship with people who make images also. So of course, working with photographers or filmmakers or designers, etc., and just creating, and it really is endless, and it really is, at least for me, always about the relationship with architecture, the city, and urbanism. Skateboarding is big in 2022. To give you some context and some numbers, even though it's very hard to give numbers because skateboarders don't like to be under federations and they don't like to actually be known as skateboarders that much, but we estimate the amount of skateboarders as 85 million in the world, with 28% in Europe, and the market that represents skateboarding is 10 billion. And it's been growing, and it's going to keep on growing. And skateboarding today is all around the planet. We find skateboarding even in India. We find skateboarding in all type of countries, and it has a lot of history. We find images from skateboarding from the 50s in New York City, for example. And yeah, it just takes so many different shapes. As I said, skateboarding is just a tool, and you can make so many things with it. You can go buy bread every morning with skateboarding if you want. You can be a competitor and be in the Olympic Games, or you can build and develop communities. I show the example of Skateistan in Afghanistan, where they use skateboarding as a tool to give power to young girls and teach them skateboarding lessons. And I think that's a very powerful example of what skateboarding can do today. Yeah. The thing I always explain, especially to people who don't skateboard or the people who work for municipalities, is the difference between street and skate parks. Skate parks are actually replicas of what you find in the streets. And street skateboarding really is the essence of skateboarding and is what you're going to find no matter what, no matter how many perfect skate parks are going to be built. Street skateboarding is always going to happen. And actually, the more skate parks you're going to build, the more street skaters you're going to have, because people learn in skate parks, but then eventually they go in the streets and communicate, take photos, make videos, etc. So for all the city planners or the councils that are building a skate park will prevent kids to play with skateboards in the streets, it's not going to work like that. It's actually going to create the opposite effect. And my whole message really is about the city as a playground. Like a quote I like to use a lot is that in skateboarding, the star is the city. So what we like to showcase in the city. And something that I find very interesting from all the trips, all the travels, all the people I've had the chance to meet through my skateboarding career is that you have a skateboarding style that develops in each part of the world, depending on the cultural and the architectural background that you're going to find in each city. So for example, this is a photo of what represents skateboarding in New York City, and it is very raw. It is a lot like, let's say, hip-hop based, and it has a lot to do with using, for example, cellar doors or just New York architecture. And there is a skateboarding style that developed because of the architectural background of New York City. Same with San Francisco, where people skate the hills a lot of San Francisco and are going to have more like a surfy skateboarding style, if I can say, which is also very interesting. Japan, I'm very interested in Japanese skateboarding. Japanese skateboarders skate more like ninjas or like manga characters. And even in the way they produce, they film or they shoot photos, there really is a skateboarding style that is Japanese and that is very strong. In Europe, of course, we love to use the architecture, the old classic architecture, and there is a European skateboarding style as well. In Brazil, as well, there is a style that's connected to the architecture and the type of urbanism that you're going to find in Brazil. So all of this to say that skateboarding is connected to urbanism, skateboarding is connected to architecture, and it has been for a long time, and it will be for a long time. So that little intro done, I'm happy to talk to you today about something that's make me very proud, is my city of Bordeaux, a place where I grew up, where my family is based, and I'm going to tell you the story about skateboarding in Bordeaux. So Bordeaux has luckily a very big skate community and a very big skate scene with skate schools. The number one skate media in France is based in Bordeaux. And we have like just a big community with people who are creative and produce a lot of content and take photos and videos in the streets of Bordeaux. People have been filming in Bordeaux for 30 years and producing, like uploading footage from the city for a long time now. And most importantly, skating the streets of Bordeaux and showcasing the streets of Bordeaux. When we had to give a number to the amount of skateboarders in the metropolitan area of Bordeaux, the number is really high. The people who use a skateboard come to 35,000. I know it sounds really high, but just the local organization that has 8,000 people registered, and not all skaters are registered to this local organization. So it's a big skate community. And the problem we had for many years in Bordeaux is that skateboarding was prohibited. So skateboarding was illegal on many of the public spaces that skateboarders loved and cherished. because some residents would complain about the noise of skateboarding, and it is true, skateboarding is loud, it can create some nuisance. But kids would get fined for 135 euros every time they would get caught skateboarding on a place that's not legal to skate. And it lasted for a long time. We used to even get tickets by rollerblader cops, which was kind of funny, but not so much after you get 4 or 5 tickets by rollerblader cops, you know, and they can catch you pretty quick also. So yeah, we had, the whole city was full of no skateboarding signs and of insane skate stoppers. You know, these little spikes or pieces of furniture that you find that prevent skaters to grind and slides on edges, and often that you can find also to prevent homeless people to sleep on some places. But of course, this would not prevent us from skateboarding. We would always skate as much as ever, and we would just find ways to skate over the skate stoppers, or to build our own DIY spots, or to skate at night to avoid the city cops. So it was kind of like, you know, we got used to skating illegally in the city and producing images like that. But honestly, after 10 years of this, you get pretty tired, and you get tired of seeing kids like 13, 14-year-old getting chased by the police, getting ticketed, you know. And one day I went at the city hall, I crossed the city hall of Bordeaux, and I saw 2 14-year-olds getting chased by the police because they were skateboarding on a Saturday afternoon in the sun, and one of the kids almost got run over by the tram because he was getting chased by the cops. And I remember this really clicked, and I was like, this is not possible. These kids are just playing. There is just miscommunication. We need to act and do something. And the problem is, as skateboarders, since we felt so underground, we didn't want to talk to the city council. We felt like no communication was needed. So we decided to contact the council, and we actually proposed solutions. And the first thing that came to mind was to try to share space. And we tried to set up time frames on some of the places that were problematic. And so we did many meetings with the residents that didn't want skateboarding in the streets, with the mayor, with the elected, and with some of the representatives from skateboarding. And we came up with the idea of these time frames that we tested for 3 months. And we communicated a lot towards the skateboarders, and we explained to them that it was a win-win to be able to skate these places again, even with time frames, if they respected that. And it worked out. So the skaters respected that, and the city was happy about it, and the residents were very surprised because they didn't think it was going to work out at all. And he stayed. So it also meant a lot of communication. So we did a lot of mediation. We printed some little flyers that we would give to all the skate shops, to the skaters in the streets, they would see, etc. And we even had, with the local organization, we hired a young mediator that would go on the spots to talk with everybody. So it really was a process. It took about 2 years to work on this stuff, you know. And what helped us a lot was to set up skateboarding in a cultural and artistic context. And for that, we had the help of the Modern Art Museum of Bordeaux, who set up a big exhibition about skateboarding, and that was really helpful. The city started to communicate positively about skateboarding, and everything switched. Basically, we went from a repressive policy to an integrative policy within 2 years, which was kind of beautiful to witness. And from there, we proposed to go to the next step, which was integration. How can skateboarding can be integrated in the way we develop the city? And we, with the city, worked on a skate master plan. So a skate master plan, it took us 6 months. We met all the city planners and the elected in charge of all the different urban projects upcoming for the city of Bordeaux. We studied if yes or no we could integrate skateboarding in the way we're going to make these spaces. When I say integrate skateboarding, it doesn't mean making skate parks. It means subtly integrating skateboarding by making these public spaces skate-friendly, only when possible, of course. And with a global vision of the city, by also thinking how skaters would go from A, B, C, D, E, F, and go around the city in a way that the whole city can be a playground, and that also helps with the places that can be conflictual by making these spaces less used by skaters, because we're proposing some new spots. So we proposed a lot of projects, and one thing that really was a good communication thing was the play project that was shown in the documentary that you just watched. So we set up some skateboard sculptures around the city. This one with that's like a ledge or a bench that you can skate on with some chairs on top of it, that we called cohabitation, in order to explain to the people that we can all share the same objects and we can share this space together, even though we don't have the same uses. So yeah, we did a bunch of skatable objects around town. It worked out really well. And then the year after, because that's something I'm very interested in, is creating bridges with other cities now. We sent our skateboard sculptures to the city of Malmö, which in Sweden, which also has a skate-friendly policy. And Malmö sent us their sculptures. So we exchanged objects, and that was something pretty fun to do. But these projects were just ephemeral. So there was exhibitions, it lasts 3 months in the streets, and it mostly is a good communication thing for the general public, and also for the skaters to learn how to cohabitate or to live together. What I'm really interested in is how do we make long-lasting, skate-friendly public spaces, and how it can actually be quite simple. And one thing we did with the city is we made them buy benches that are good for skateboarding, so granite benches that are going to be the right height, the right length, the right material, that are going to have the right angle. And we set up some of these benches around town. And it was interesting because, for example, one space like this park, which was a little bit dangerous at times, you know, in Bordeaux, where you had some drug deals and people didn't feel very confident to go at some times of the day. By adding 2 skatable benches, people would come and play and skate all day in this park, and it would actually make the park safer, because skaters would be here skating, you know, all day. It would create natural security, and that's something the city really noticed, you know. Other projects that we've done were remodeling some spaces, so dormant spaces, how to reactivate some dormant spaces. And for example, this space that was basically abandoned, that people used to skate in Bordeaux in the 70s. We have photos of people skating there in the 70s. And that got skate stopped by the city when they were into repressive policy against skateboarding, by putting stripes on the ground, for example. We got to remodel this space with skateboarding in mind, with actually quite little money, you know, just by redoing the planters, by redoing the ground, and this space became a place full of life again. With even now, like in 2022, we have people who come here to picnic, we have people who come here with their kids to play, and I strongly believe that skateboarding is a life, brings life to spaces, you know, and not only skaters, but other people are going to come and use these spaces because it is skate friendly. So that's a little history of how we went from repressive to integrative. And I wanted also to say that, of course, we are not the only city to do this. And tonight we have the chance to have a powerful skateurbanist in the crowd called Rafa Murolo, that's here tonight, from São Paulo, Brazil. Maybe I'd like you guys to applaud him. And the story of Rafa is beautiful because Rafa worked on Vale Anhangabaú in São Paulo, which is a very iconic skate spot in São Paulo that the city of São Paulo decided to destroy a few years ago. And with the community, he fought, with the skate community, he fought to redesign this space. Rafa is an architect and also a skater, and they redesigned a space for everybody, but also thought for skateboarding that is incredible, completely amazing. And I think in the story of Rafa, what's interesting is that when they first got in touch with the city about the destruction of this iconic space that was very emotionally important for the local community, the city was like, okay, we're destroying this space, but don't worry, we'll build a skate park. And the skaters were like, we don't want a skate park. We want a public space for everybody where we can play, we can skate, and where we can share, you know, not just a space for us, but a space for everyone. And together with the community, they got to redesign this place, and I think it's a very powerful project that's very inspiring. Same with South Bank in London. This space, South Bank, that was documented and skated for so many years, almost got destroyed for a mall project. And the skaters got together as a community to explain the importance of this space, and they got to save South Bank and even remodel it and make it better. And the city of Malmö, also in Sweden, which, same as in Bordeaux, has a skate-friendly policy and integrates skateboarding in the urban development of the city when possible. So there are many examples about how skateboarding can give life to places again, or can be a social, cultural value to spaces. And yeah, I'm excited to see what the future will bring for this. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Leo. Now, I mean, we are going to switch from yeah. Do you want to? No. Yeah.
I'm going to sit because I have some words in front of me.
Yes. Mauricio is going to talk about this iconic project in New York, which is an amazing way also to go from one point to another. I think that one of the beautiful thing about skateboarding is it's not just a practice, it's also a means of transportation. It's taking you from one point to another, and also the A-line, and it's beautiful, but it also helps you to do something else. And I think when we can combine things, we can create platform for growth to our city to flourish. And I think that, I mean, you're doing an amazing job.
Thank you. Buonasera, buenas noches, good evening. My name is Mauricio Garcia. I'm the Chief Program and Engagement Officer at the Highline in New York City. Like Leo, I'm excited to be here in Florence, to be with all of you. Ricardo, Francesca, thank you for inviting me to be here. Today I want to take you through a little bit of a journey, so kind of continuing the theme of journeys of how the Highline came to be, and how the Highline that is today, a public space and park, really has similar origins of what we were before we went through, as we say, infrastructure reuse, and you might say regeneration process. But the heart of everything is people, and I want that to be top of mind as I go through my presentation. So this is, in the United States, when we talk about our nonprofits or our NGOs, we talk about a mission. And so this is really the mission of the Highline. We are both a park and a public space, and we're thinking about the way we reimagine the use of public spaces to be able to benefit the many communities that we serve, not just a few select interests. And for those of you unfamiliar with the Highline has been around the organization has been around since 1999. And the park opened up, the first section of the park opened up in 2009. And the last section was opened up just a couple of years ago. And we're still growing, and I'll get to that in a little bit. So I put this slide here because I really like it. I think it's very pretty. It's actually very pink on my screen, but not as pink on here. But this was really actually very helpful in thinking about it, the journey of us. So I'll walk you through all of this journey throughout the presentation, but this really shows the evolution of the park, the physical space, but also the evolution of the neighborhood that we represent and the neighborhoods and the communities that we represent and serve every day. So we'll start with saving the High Line. So the High Line that you might know today, that it is the public space today, may not have been possible. There were forces out there that really wanted to demolish it. And that specifically was Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. He wanted to tear down the High Line when he was mayor. That's the only thing I will say about Mayor Giuliani today. But really, for over 6 decades, the area that now holds the High Line served as a vital passageway to transport meat, produce, and other goods to the entire city. The Hudson River, which is the west side of Manhattan, was a major port, and so ships would land and they would connect to these passageways to transport that. And initially, you see here, it was on the street level, but that quickly became problematic because it was dangerous, a lot of accidents, a lot of fatalities. And so the city decided, let's make an elevated railway. And so for years, a lot of those goods would be transported, and many of the buildings, like this one, that it would go under or connect to were actually strategic because some of the goods and services would be offloaded there, get on a truck, and then go elsewhere. But that started to decline because in the United States, the rise of the interstate highway really brought to life, truck transportation. And so railways, including this one, which has a very specific purpose, became obsolete. And so the last train went down the High Line in the early 1980s, and eventually nature took over, and it became abandoned. A lot of people would break in because it was a beautiful walk, and it was actually quite gorgeous in terms of the way that nature actually started coming up from the rail lines. But there was a couple people who did not want the city to demolish the High Line. So these two guys, very general, very regular people, Josh to your left, to my right, and Robert to my left, they were just regular residents of Chelsea. They met at a community board meeting, which a community board meeting is part of the structure of being able to share information within the city. And they heard about the city wanting to demolish it. And so they thought, it's a gorgeous structure. It adds so much value in terms of just the city, the beautiful combination of the railway, the infrastructure, and the greenery, that they thought that maybe there was a way, there would be other people that were interested in saving it. And there was a lot of people that really valued the structure and had sort of the idea maybe it could be something else. What that something else, people were unclear about. But what they did know is that the west side of Manhattan at that time was starved of public space. It was starved of green space. And so perhaps this very, infrastructure, old piece of infrastructure could be repurposed in some way. But they knew they couldn't do it alone. They knew they had to rally other people, they had to organize, and they talked to a number of different people who were, one, interested, and also had a sort of a close connection to this physical structure. They talked to small business owners, they talked to residents of public housing, they talked to people with connections, with resources, and they all sort of agreed that this was something they could get behind. But there was another missing piece. These people had influence, they were the local electeds. Sorry for the fuzziness, but you see two particular people here who you probably recognize. One to my right is then Senator Hillary Clinton, and then to my left, then Mayor Michael Bloomberg. And so they were key to this, particularly Michael Bloomberg. He was key to understanding the value of public space, and for this particular area that there wasn't a lot of public space. But I would even highlight the woman to his left, Amanda Burden. It wasn't the local electeds that really saw it. She was the head of the city planning. And so people like David, who are in the muck, they're in the day-to-day, they're the ones that see what might be possible. And if it wasn't for her, the mayor would not have known what might be possible. So that's really a shout out and a tip of the hat to the public servants who are in this work every single day. So we needed them, and we fortunately got them on our side, and so we got to work. And so what did that mean? And so this is where people comes back in. We had an ideas competition. We asked people from all over New York City, all over the country, all over the world, send us your ideas on what this 1.5 mile former railway could be. And so we got a lot of ideas. This one in particular was an idea to create a mile-long lap pool. So imagine swimming in Chelsea, in New York. It sounds great, but it's really not feasible. We got this one, build a roller coaster. Maybe that could have happened, but it did not, fortunately. And we got several, like hundreds, over 700 more. But we kept going back to this one. We heard from stakeholders, we heard from people that what they really valued was the sort of marriage of this old infrastructure and how nature took over, and how this picture, which is iconic of the Highline, really sort of identified with so many different people. So we wanted to use that as our inspiration. And so we got to work. And then, ultimately, the first section of the Highline in 2009 opened up. And this is what was the meatpacking, or it's still the meatpacking district, but the meatpacking district back then, for those of you know, to my right, that would be the Whitney Museum, which is not there right now. And there's a lot of different restaurants and places. So in terms of regeneration, the Highline wasn't the main reason, but it was a key reason. And this is another picture. You see the Standard Hotel, a major hotel. But that wasn't really the end of it. We opened. There was the first section, the second section, the third section of the Highline. But we go back to this often. We imagine what public space can be. We had the idea, let's elevate a rail line, making it a park, but there was a lot more to it. And so we've become sort of a model. I've seen it. I've only been at the Highline for about 3 years, but I have a Google alert that says Highline, and I get the Highline of Camden, the Highline of Liverpool, the Highline of Tulsa. And that's great, but it's also unfair to the many projects that have come after us. So we've become a model of infrastructure reuse. And key to that identity from the Highline is the marriage, again, of design, art, and horticulture. And so we've welcomed well over 8 million visitors each year from all over the place. COVID has, of course, changed that a little bit, but we're seeing this year that come back up. And so one of the things we always think about is accessibility. We were talking earlier about safety, and for us, we're elevated, so that provides a layer of safety and security, but really it's about accessibility and how people actually traverse this linear park, because they use it for commuting, they use it for relaxation and other things. But for that marriage I mentioned, we offer horticulture that's on any level of any botanic garden out there. And you have a unique perspective from an elevated view of New York City. And then we have museum quality public art. So your fellow Italian, Cecilia Alemani, is our chief curator. And so for her, the Highline is inspiration in terms of her curation. And for the Highline, it wouldn't be the Highline without our public art. And we offer programs that serve many people, our neighbors, local schools, and they're all free. And so in the United States, we talk about equity quite a bit. And so the Highline, that's been my North Star. My goal is to how do we embed equity into the way we operate the park? And so one way is to do everything for free, so we find the resources to be able to offer that. How do we do that? Well, we do that with a committed staff, but as a public-private partnership, we have to generate the resources to be able to keep up with the art program, with the horticulture, and so on. And so one thing that we didn't know when we started was how much value would be generated and brought back to the city, to the local business owners, and so on. I think, and I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I think it was in the hundreds of millions, low hundreds of millions. We've generated over $1.9 billion since, in over 10 years of the park being open. And that goes back to the city. That's reinvested back in the city. And key to that partnership is that marriage with the city. So the Highline is owned by New York City. We have an agreement to manage it and raise resources. But without that relationship, the Highline wouldn't exist. And we commit to privately raising all of the costs to maintain the park. And that's key to that public-private partnership. So this is where I'm most excited about this piece. This is what I do every day, and it's about the people, the places, and opportunity. So we are public space, but our contribution extends well beyond that of an amazing public park. We are a literal and metaphorical platform that connects people to places and connects people to each other, as well as the cultural, educational, and economic opportunities that are generated within our neighborhood, within our city. And we're, as an organization that has the role and the spotlight that we have, we're committed to leveraging our economic power, intellectual resources to be able to benefit the communities around us, and particularly those who haven't really benefited from the boom that we've seen in Chelsea and the west side of Manhattan. So this is where I get a little policy wonky, so I apologize. But here you see basically a cutout of the High Line. We cover 1.5 miles, and those are the neighborhoods that we consider kind of our neighborhoods. What really, if you look at some of the census information, you'll see that this area is predominantly white, predominantly affluent, and very educated. But really, that doesn't tell the whole story. Within that block, we have two very large social public housing, where roughly almost 5,000 people live. We also have a lot of older adults who live in affordable housing, which roughly amounts to 5,000 people in affordable housing. And although that doesn't make up a huge percentage of the people who live here, but it does make up a population that hasn't benefited from that $1.9 billion that I mentioned before. And so for us, that is where we're constantly asking ourselves, how do we bridge those worlds? What role do we play in being able to have those tale of those two cities make it one city? And so this is where our role is to leverage the High Line, the park, and the organization as a platform to leverage social connections, raise awareness on key social issues, and this is the big one, to support, elevate diverse communities, particularly those under-resourced and historically underrepresented. Again, this is the people aspect of it. So it's imperative that the High Line commits itself to listen to, learn from, and be responsive to the communities we serve, and to always seek new and better ways to serve them. So in just the last couple of years, we've created a neighbors council, not connected to the city. It's completely ours. It's made of folks as old as 83, as young as 15, every shade, every economic demographic is made up. And their role is they live and work in Chelsea. And their role is really for us to strengthen our ties with the neighborhood, to elicit their input, get their ideas, get their interests, and see how we can actually incorporate that in our planning and execution of our work. And we also collaborate with them around community-based initiatives. We've set aside some dollars in our budget to be able to actually bring to life programs that they want. So for instance, last year, we went through a visioning process where we gave dollars to a local school who lost money because of COVID cuts from the city government. And we're committed to hiring staff and procuring services locally, particularly by women-owned businesses, by businesses of people of color, and those who live in public and affordable housing. Again, we're thinking about where does that money go, and does it stay in the neighborhood, and how can we elevate those individuals who have not benefited from some of the impacts. And this is the stuff that I mentioned before. We elevate a broad range of artists presenting a very robust art program that's free and accessible to the public every day of the year. We offer free, dynamic, intergenerational programming on and off the park that's in partnership primarily with a lot of our community-based organizations, a lot of organizations who serve younger adults, older adults, et cetera. And these are our teens, our High Line teens. We provide employment and educational opportunities for our young people, particularly those who are under-resourced, throughout the city, and expanding their opportunity to leadership and career development opportunities. We're in local public schools, particularly those who serve those populations that I mentioned. And our curriculum is focused on the marriage of art, design, and sustainability. And so we've often, one of the founders, Robert, who was my boss until a little while ago, for many, many years, he would always get emails and contacted by other cities to say, how did the Highline do this? How did the Highline do that? And the reality of all is, like, more than half of the time, he didn't have an answer because they were learning as they were going. They weren't urbanists, they weren't architects, but it hadn't been really done and put on paper as to what are good practices. And so instead of continuing to field these calls, we created different ways to be able to have these peer-to-peer networks created so they can learn from each other. And so we convene parks organizations nationwide and throughout the city who are looking to create something like the Highline, to reuse infrastructure, to create inclusive public spaces. One of those is the Highline Network. This is a peer-to-peer learning network of folks from across the United States and North America. We have a project in Mexico City and 2 projects in Toronto who are looking to create, to transform unused infrastructure into vibrant public spaces and parks. And locally, we have something called the Public Space Alliance, which is a local version of the network that's trying to do the same thing. And through that work, we test, we pilot, and we share practices and resources to inspire other leaders that are trying to do something similar, and inspire ourselves, for that matter, in how to actually embed equity and people in the design and execution of these projects. But we have this conversation a lot. We go back to, what is our job? What is the most important thing we do? And that's to maintain a public park. Sometimes we forget because we do all the things that I mentioned, but if we didn't have a public park that was like the Highline, none of the other work would be possible. So our work in maintaining, and in some cases creating new parts of the Highline, is never done. And so we have a deep commitment in that process to community engagement and thinking about some of our core constituencies. And so we are, this summer, adding new, safer, permanent stairs. These are the things that are not sexy. We're adding permanent stairs to 3 of our entrances. We're adding I should talk to you about how to make the skateboard friendly. We are adding public plaza at 18th Street, just below the Highline, which would be the first time that the Highline actually goes to street level. And this is currently in construction. We are in the process of constructing a connection from the Highline to a major transportation hub, Penn Station, so that people can seamlessly and easily traverse that part of Manhattan. And so the Highline is a park, but we're a lot more. But the key thing to a lot of what we do is really, how are we thinking about our populations, our communities? And yes, we have a lot of wealthy folks who are backing us and supporting us, but for me, our core thing is, are we meeting the needs of the people in our neighborhood who are most in need? And that's sort of what we're trying to do as being that connector going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mauricio. So we're going larger and larger with our journey. So now it's time for David, which is going to tell us about really, not only big but also long and difficult process, but that is going and is actually changing the shape and the attitude of a huge part of the city.
Thank you. Buonasera. Thank you for the organization, for inviting Barcelona here today. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to have learned so much from Leo and Mauricio. I'm an architect, urbanist. Currently, I am the director of the Municipal Institute of Urbanism from the City Council of Barcelona. But the story that I'm going to tell you about is my previous work. I had the opportunity and the privilege to update one of the important projects of the City of Barcelona, which is the Innovation District 22 Ad, to make it more inclusive and more sustainable. But I will focus on the inclusiveness of the issue. Okay, this is the place. You know that Barcelona, from the Olympics, gained the sea to the city, the beach. And through that winning, this area that was an industrial part of Barcelona, which is called Poble Nou, like Pueblo Novo, was in the eyes of the real estate sector. As you can imagine, there were a lot of projects to change this industrial area into new neighborhoods with luxury houses, etc. But that was not the thing that the city council decided. In fact, the innovation district that began in the year 2000, which we call 22@, is part of the urban strategy of the city to gain or to reach or to give opportunities to this to the low-income part of the metropolitan area of Barcelona, which is the east part along the Besòs River. Through the Besòs River, we have 1 million people living that represent the lower and middle low income rate in general terms. So it's been always difficult to put economic opportunities in this part of the city, and very easy to put it in the west, where we have the airport, we have the harbor, and that's why the city has been attending this part of the metropolitan area, trying to launch some development projects, one of which was 22@. Okay, this is what was there before the urbanization of this city, of this part. This is the Poble Nou original settlement. You recognize at the left the citadel, the old city, and there is a line, a diagonal line here, which is Pietro Quarto, which is the old road going from the city center to France. Along this road and in this old part, this was the place where the first industries that could not have room in the inner city, in the city surrounded by the walls, they found place here. So the first industrialization of Barcelona took place here. Also, the first train of Spain was running from Barcelona through the northern coast, and those were marshy lands. So what we find here is a very characteristic agricultural pattern that was very respected by the first settlement. Okay, I guess you know the famous orthogonal grid of the extension plan, so characteristic from Barcelona. So this area is organized as a part of the extension plan of Barcelona. So what happened after the 19th century was the urbanization in terms of this, the completement of this orthogonal grid to place the new industry. So in fact, there was a combination between the old pattern, agricultural pattern with the first settlements from the 18th, 19th century, and the 20th century industries, more modern industries that were following this orthogonal pattern. So in fact, in the 20th century and before, this was known as the Catalan Manchester for the big amount of industries, mainly from textile, but also from the metal sector and logistics, and so. So what we can find here is this mixture between 18th, 19th century factories, some houses related, more modern industries, and this was the characteristic atmosphere of Poble Nou until 60s, 70s, last century. But this area went into a decline by means of delocalization. They found cheaper land outside Barcelona. So some factories were closing, also because of changes in technology. And through 60s, 70s, and 80s, the area became into a certain decline. Okay, after the Olympics, and with the pressure of the real estate sector that wanted to do housing here, the city council decided that, of course, this area was obsolete. It had to be regenerated. But there was a bet at that moment, but some urban planners of the city, some economists of the city, to keep and to maintain the economic sense of the area and changing from manufacturing to something that was knocking at the door at that moment, the knowledge economy. So attracting universities, attracting the digital sector and so on. And that was the origin of the 22@ plan. So in the year 2000, the city council approved a renewing plan that made the transformation for 200 hectares, which are these two blue areas, the south part and the north part. And mainly, I will not explain the plan, it's very complex, but mainly it's based on three ideas. The first thing is complexity. So the idea is that there has to be room for the new uses, for new buildings, but some identity has to be maintained. So in parallel, there was a protection plan of about 100 buildings, the most appreciated architectural buildings. The second idea is mixture. We can introduce economy, we can introduce housing, also public space, new streets, facilities. And the third idea is density. And density was needed to make the transformation economically viable. Because the transformation is paid by the privates. We don't put money as a public administration in the renewal of streets. And we obtain for free 30% of the land. See, after the transformation, it's almost 100% private land. But after the transformation, in each city block, we obtain 30% of the land for free for housing, social housing, public facilities, and public spaces. So that was the idea of a plan in the year 2000. But after 17 years of transformation, of course, what happened is that citizens, the local community, they not received the transformation as a good thing. What they saw was these new buildings, these high new buildings, medium-sized new buildings that had nothing to do with the local community, with the soft structures, with the identity of the place. And in the year 2017, the city council decided to revise the project. It is a successful project. It is very worldwide known. It was the first innovation district launched in the world together with Boston. So it's a really successful project, but it was not well received by the community. So the city council decided in the year 2017 to launch a committee incorporating every area in the city council that had something to do with the project, so urban planning, economic promotion, the digital sector, participation area, and etc. And immediately extend that community to the quadruple helix. And that was very new. So we engaged in the discussion the different neighborhood associations, the old ones and the new ones, the younger ones, the most active in the place, the artists, also the three public universities that were placed in 22at in Poble, the companies, the enterprises, and the real estate sector also, because you can do not anything without them. So you have to incorporate them. And the public administration, not only the city council, also the metropolitan strategic plan and other public administrations related. So within this quadruple helix, we tried to change the way the administration interacts with the community. So it's not a matter of making a plan and explain it to you. That's not participation. That's information. So it's a matter of co-creating. We launched a process of co-creation, developing some teams, thematic teams. And each thematic teams, here you have representatives from the public sector, from the universities, from the citizens, and from the enterprises, from the companies. And within sessions of 3-4 hours, discussing around one issue, so letting each other recognize the differences, recognize the legitimate interests, and trying to find a common basis in which we have to put forward. So one opportunity is that the plan was not completed. In 5 years ago, we have just 25% built, so we still had room for the new things to come. There was a big housing debate because in the original plan, only 10% of total new buildings were for housing. So there was lack of life in 22at. There was lack of life. There was not enough community in terms of residents. So the idea was to increase to minimum 30%. That was one big debate. And the other big debate is what to do with these two different worlds. People, community, ancient cooperativism. We talk about one neighborhood that is industrially based, so there is a strong sense of identity, a strong sense of community, with these kind of new workers, the digital nomads that come and then go. So how to give them opportunity to recognize each other, to have occasion to communicate, to make something together. Okay, after 1.5 years working with the quadruple helix, they get a consensus, they get an agreement, and we ask our mayor to sign this agreement as the maximum representation of the city council, and the different universities, the different representations of representatives of the neighborhood associations, the Barcelona neighborhood association, the younger ones, and the real estate sector and the companies, they signed the agreement, and this agreement is about 19 points. Don't ask me why they are not 20, they are 19. Maybe there was one that did not go on. I will not go deeper in the 19, but mainly it was about changing the neighboring housing and urban model, so changing the plan. So the idea is you have to change the plan, the urban plan. It is a successful plan, but you have to change it. So give more room for social housing, because the successful character of 22@ has made gentrification appear. So there has been increasing of prices, not only in terms of residents, also in terms of economic activity. So some activities, makers, etc., did not have opportunity to pay the rental prices of the area. So change the rules of the plan to make these activities remain. Give room for social and solidarity in innovation and economy. And take a deeper view on heritage. Heritage is not only those 100 buildings that we preserved previously. Heritage is about the atmosphere of one street, the low houses, some parts of the area that have not architectural value individually, but altogether they have identity value. So that has to be revised, because the intention is to transform it, to erase it. And of course, introducing some ecological and sustainability issues that were not in the year 2000, and at this time they are more evident. And to consolidate a governance body within the quadruple helix, and implement a technical office that can take care of this. So in general terms, those were the points that they agreed. I think that you have in the entrance you have the book that we published of the agreement. It's also downloadable in PDF. So mainly it was about recognizing this old road, Peraquart, Pietro Quarto, as a civic axis, recognizing these red spots here that were intended to be erased, making a tabula rasa, that they have some value as a collective area, and trying to give room and trying to regulate the way that soft structures can remain in the place, because they give character and they are crucial for the entrance of Poble Nou. And finally, just one of the 19th points was this of Peraquart, Pietro Quarto, to consolidate it as a heritage, cultural and creativity axis, because it through Peraquart we have the greatest amount of industrial buildings from the 18th and 19th century. Most of them are actually in public hands. And just a couple of examples. We have this Can Ricard, is an old factory where we have Hangar. Hangar is a creation factory. The building is owned from the city council, and we have given it to local artists to make experimentation. And another one is La Escocesa, which is also property from the city council. It was given for free in a reparceling process. Here we have resident artists that try to create and to make research in analogic artist issues. And one of the things that they do, because they are here from the 90s, so before the launching of 22 at Innovation District, they were here, and one of their activities is to create community around these old factories, and to open their activities to the local residents and to the schools and all these people. So those are two simple ideas that I wanted to show to you, and for the moment that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. During our conversation, I tried to ask them a question that is much more something they could imagine. If the three of you were living in the same city, that would be an amazing city, by the way. What would you ask each other, and what could be also the scale of your partnership? This question before started a beautiful conversation between the three of you, and I would like to start with Mauricio posing that question to the other two guests.
Sure. So I can speak up. So hello. Okay. So I mentioned before that we work with the Highline. We support other projects like it, most of whom are in the process of being thought of, or they're in construction. And so the question I would have is for Leo, and thinking about, I like the concept of play, and what would you tell all those fascinating projects that are reusing infrastructure? What would you say to them about how skateboarding can add value and fun and community to their development of public spaces?
Yes, so I believe when I talk about skateboarding, I believe it's you have to see a bigger picture, and as you said, the act of playing freely in a city is very important, and I think that's something that can be created in the design of public space, and that can be also very subtle, and that can also be brought in a way that people can be free to play the way they want, you know, more than telling them what they're supposed to be doing. So I believe it really is a question of design, and there is a lot you can do with this. You can take so many different shapes and forms, and that's what's interesting about it also. Also, one thing I believe can be added is mixing, and something I'm trying to develop these days is how you can mix vegetation, plants with, for example, skateboarding or the act of playing or sports, free sports. And I can picture many ideas of different type of planters that could be fun to play with, for example, without, of course, destroying the plants, but so yeah, it really is a question of design, in my opinion, and how we perceive public space, and how we let people use this in a free way, you know.
Thank you.
David,
okay, I would like Mauricio to help with some hard infrastructures. For me, the issue of hard infrastructure, we have the temptation to demolish or to put it underneath or to hide it. For me, the example of the Highline is how to regenerate something without destroying it. So adding value by preserving it. So I think that's a great lesson. No? And in the case of Leo, how to put in the collective imaginarium one place by using it differently. That's an interesting thing that I think he does fantastically, and I would use it in Barcelona. There are several places that are unused, or there have been many public resources put in there, and they are not successful at all. And maybe with this kind of activities, they can be in the imaginarium of the nearer community and not so nearer. So that those are two things that I would use from the experience of Mauricio and Leo for sure.
One last thing from my side is we talk also about the value. So how do you measure the value? How do you retain the value that you create through activities and through the change that you bring to the city? And how can you ensure not only to be able to measure it, but also to make that value go in the right direction? Within your practice, within your work, and within your planning.
I can take that. So one thing the Highline didn't do that well was when I mentioned the 1.9 billion, but at the time the Chelsea wasn't the Chelsea that has all the famous architects with the buildings. So one thing we kind of look back and wish we would have done is to think about the idea of value capture and how we build in the policies and the protocols to be able to ensure that that value doesn't just go to, we have a lot of people who buy in Chelsea and then they go back to wherever they live and they never come back, but they come back every other year. So that value is lost. Not completely lost, but the value to the neighborhood is lost in some ways. And so we think about what sort of policies. So from the city level, there's a lot that can be done in terms of just practices and policy that can be embedded. With a lot of our projects, they're thinking about if they're like the Atlanta Beltline. For those of you who don't know, it's an old rail line that goes through the entire, I think it's 32 miles. They're thinking about knowing from the Highline example and the other examples, what sort of other things can be done. And so they're thinking about almost like what you're talking about here with this location is, what about social housing? What about small business development, particularly for families and or for people who, you know, again, I go back to equity, who are women-owned entrepreneurs, artists, people of color. How are you building that into that planning process so that that value actually goes to the folks who most in need, and so that the people who live there aren't displaced. And so that's something that is a big topic of conversation among a lot of the public spaces that we work with. Because if we could have redo it again, we would rethink it in terms of the Highline in New York City.
Well, in the case of urban planning, we are subjected to the laws. Fortunately, in Spain, and particularly the Catalan laws, are, I would say, are very lefty, and the value that you produced, like magically changing the plan, it can be conduced to generate equality in the area, in a territory, generally speaking, and we can obtain land for free. That's very interesting, because in an area where 100% of land is private hands, you have no opportunity to build facilities or to generate public space. By means of urban reparceling, of urban development, you have possibility to obtain land, and land is the most valuable element in a dense city like Barcelona. And then another thing is by adding urban value to the plots, you can obtain the money to urbanize public space and the streets. So that money doesn't come from the municipal budget. It comes from this process of transformation. So that's one kind of value that we generate by our work. And the second one is the economic activity that appears in the place. In the case of Poble, I've said that was an area in decline, that there was economic value there, it went. So by adding new economic opportunities, obviously there are new jobs created. We have indicators about that. The challenge is to make a right balance between the different kind of economies. So to get an ecosystem where we can have Google, for example, but we can have the maker or we can have the bakery, or we can have the pharmacy. So the idea is to have a right balance. We cannot avoid Google coming to Barcelona in this street, because it's in this district.
We can give you some of those. We have a lot of them.
but we have to be aware to by that fact not gentrify the soft economy. So that's what I didn't say, but the plan was approved last week. So after 5 years working, the new plan has been approved finally. So those will be the rules. It's brand new. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, from my part, it seems more difficult to really estimate what skateboarding brings, especially from an economical value. But what I can tell is that making a space skate-friendly brings tourism, it brings life, and it definitely also brings people consuming to like nearby shops and stuff. So I know in some of the places that we reactivated with skateboarding, some of the shop owners nearby are happy about the fact that skaters come here and consume actually. But I was more like questioning about the question of security. In France, as we were talking about earlier, we had the presidential elections this year, and the question of security was on top of the debate constantly. People are talking about security. And I believe that there are ways to bring security to spaces with like natural security, just by bringing life. And I noticed on some of the spaces, like I said in the presentation, that by adding a couple skatable elements, we bring natural security just by having people being active on these spaces. You feel safer at 10 p.m. crossing a public space if you have a couple people playing in the middle of this space than if it's empty, you know. And that's something, I wanted to ask you guys about for your projects, and what's your idea about this?
And I think one thing about value is that it's sometimes we have a mindset in New York City, particularly, but in the country, in the U.S., the value is always monetary, and that you have to measure it monetarily, and then otherwise it doesn't matter. And so I think what you're saying is the anecdotal, right? It's the quantitative. It's like or the qualitative. You can't really put a dollar sign to fun or security. And so to me, I think that's what a park does. If there's people in a park, it adds a certain security and a certain, I don't know, there's a different dynamic that brings to the neighborhood. You know, we talk about social cohesion, and we talk about connections, and all those things are because of the bonds that you create with people who are like you or not like you, right? It breaks down some of those barriers. So to me, it reminds me that it's not always about the dollars, about the euros, about the number. It's about, you know, checking in with people and seeing how they feel. So, and I think your point is, I mean, that's something we talk about in the parks world all the time, because, you know, the New York City government, they commit less than 1% of their city budget to parks. So think about that for a minute. New York City, not even 1% of the budget goes to parks. And then during COVID, where did people go? They went to parks. So there's something wrong in that space. So.
If someone wants to ask some questions to our guests, be free. As you can see, you can mostly do it in Italian with an English accent. No, so feel free. I think it's a great opportunity. No one? Okay. Okay, yes. It's already...
It's on? Okay. So nice to hear your presentation. It's very interesting. Congratulations to the organization, because I think it's very interesting to find a transversal approach from the practice to the planning, to the experimentation, let's say, no, from the highline. So I'm wondering, as a practitioner and as professor of urban planning as well, how can we really make cities sticking together from experiences to experimentation to city planning? Because I think the answer is there, no? By finding a balance among those three factors.
I'll take also the other question so that you can choose.
Yeah. Well, my question was more anecdotal. Was just who was your most unlikely ally in what you did? Okay, so who was not the person, meaning the organization, the kind of person that you weren't expecting to help building your agenda, and that instead was there and was one resource in your journey? Thank you. Then after
maybe I can ask the question. Oh, okay.
Yeah, just a very quick question about the highline. You told that in US mostly it's given monetary value. How are you implementing a way to give a value to the unaccountable things? You told that there is safety, security, and so on. There are ways actually to give a value to what has not a value. Are you implementing such a strategy in a way to encourage the city council or what else to put money where there is no way to take account of it?
Okay, I will ask the first question. Okay, in my opinion, urban planning always comes from a conceptual framework, always takes a long time to be decided, to be approved, and then the expectation to be developed is always 20, 30 years. What happens when the plan has approved? Some of the contextual framework has changed, and so in my opinion, we should tend to do flexible urban planning that are very clear in what is structural, and are very, very flexible and very possibilistic in what is not structural. That's the first question. If not, it took us 5 years until last week that this new update of 22 was approved. What happened in these 5 years? That the real estate has burned 800,000 square meters of what happened, of what was still to be done. So we are very slow doing things. In other terms, I think that also pilot projects are interesting. Before you extend a solution to the whole city, that you think it's a good idea for the next times, you should test it in a specific place or in 2 or 3 places and see what happens. Because sometimes the idea that one has for a specific change in urbanization or in urban planning has to be tested. So the idea of continuously retesting, it's more easily when it comes to materialization. It's more difficult when it comes to regulation. Because urban planning is so difficult to be approved that it's preferable to make it very flexible and it can last 40, 50 years. It's preferable, in my opinion.
Can I take question number 2? So you asked who were our most unlikely allies. And I would say our most unlikely allies were some of the residents, because to go back to the story of Bordeaux, skateboarding was forbidden because of a few residents that it was too loud and they were complaining. And we had no communication with the city. And what was really interesting about this process really was to put people around the table and to talk together and to try to find solutions. And I think some of these residents that had a completely different view of the city at first. They thought the city was just a place to go from A to B and consume, and that's it. You go play in a sports field and that's it. They actually changed their mind. And to do this, we had to do meetings, of course, but we also had to give our hand and bring them to some of the exhibitions that we would do, talk to them, spend time with them. And I did that. I went to have coffee one by one with some of the residents. We invited them to some of the art, exhibitions we would do. And at the end, some of them would come and be like, oh, actually, you have a cultural value. And that changed everything. Once these people said that, and they started to understand, the city really switched too, you know. So I think these people actually were our best allies, you know. And I think it's very interesting to try to put people together, even though it's very difficult, but try to put people who have different point of views together in order to actually create something.
And to your question, so similar to what Leo said, so last year, and there is a data point in some of the work that I'm going to talk about. So last year we spent 8 months meeting with community residents, small businesses, other cultural institutions, corporations. So I mentioned the Google thing. Google is in Chelsea, and they're rapidly buying everything. They have basically 6 buildings or 5 buildings that they bought. And so the corporations are huge stakeholders. And so we spent 8 months talking to everyone with a focus on, again, not to be a broken record, but folks who are in need. And we asked them, what keeps you up at night? What are your biggest needs? And how can the High Line help address some of those needs? And so in all of that qualitative, there is a data set, there is a number, there is something. And those numbers of people that say that security is an issue, or that say that jobs are an issue, or that say that the conditions of public housing are terrible, that's an issue. So we can play a direct role in that. There's numbers that we can then go to our stakeholders, our donors, our elected officials and say, this many people say that X or Y or Z. And so that's how we plan, and we plan to do that process. So it wasn't a pilot, but it was a way for us to sort of redirect what we do and be able to fulfill everything I mentioned. But now we're thinking about, do we do that every year? A smaller version of that, because it is expensive. And so there is numbers behind that, and people have to listen, because particularly an elected official, and I don't mean to be cynical or jaded, but if their constituency say that safety is of concern, and they have to respond. And so that's sort of where the value does come in, is in having those processes. So it is having the coffee with as many people as you have. There is attending their events. And so this is one other thing. When I joined the High Line, when we would go to events that were hosted by community residents, organizations, and we would start showing up, they're like, oh great, the High Line is here. In just the 3 years that I've been here, if we don't go, they text me, they text my colleagues, they text a bunch of us, like, where are you? That, you can't quantify that, but that goes back to the cohesion and the relationships and the goodwill that we're developing, or that we've been kind of bringing back. And so those are numbers. They're not dollars, but they're numbers, and it tells a big story there.
So, thank you very much. Grazie Leo, David, Mauricio. It has been a pleasure to really listen to your stories and have this perspective on how we should and how we could change and reboot a city through your practice. So thank you very much everyone for listening, and have a good evening. See you tomorrow in many possible cities.